Alright everyone, tonight begins with a dive into the noisy, smoky, and mildly sticky atmosphere of the medieval tavern, that overlooked yet essential hub of town life. It served as an unspoken bulletin board, a place where a knight, a farmer, and a wandering bard could all end up equally drunk, equally broke. Far more than a spot to sip ale, it was a chaotic blend of danger, laughter, and disease tucked beneath a thatched roof. Before settling in, viewers are gently invited to like and subscribe, but only if they sincerely enjoy these stories. And feel free to share in the comments where they're watching from, and the current hour. It's always interesting to see the reach of this little community. Now let's dim the lights, perhaps switch on a fan for that gentle background hum, and slowly drift into tonight's tale. Imagine trudging along a muddy lane reeking of horses, smoke, and mysterious soup. The rain is either falling or has just stopped, leaving everything slick, including the only shoes they own. They're exhausted, hungry, and narrowly missed being flattened by a turnip cart twice. A drink is overdue. But how would one locate a tavern in those days? There were no neon signs, no reviews to consult, and certainly no GPS. Instead, they'd rely on their ears, somewhere past the clang of the blacksmith and a fishmonger bellowing about river eels. A raucous mix of singing, shouting, and laughter guides them closer. And then there it is, a crooked timber structure leaning tipsily, like the building itself had one too many. A weather-worn wooden sign swings above the entrance, its paint so faded it's unclear. Is that meant to be a barrel? Or a bear? Or both? Either way, they've found it. Welcome to the tavern. The stone step glistens with spilled ale, and as they press the iron-hinged door open, it groans theatrically, like it's announcing their arrival. A blast of warm air greets them, thick with the scent of smoke, damp wool, stale ale, and something resembling mystery meat. They're in. The ceiling dips low, forcing taller patrons to hunch while the intoxicated stumble into beams. The floor? Just dirt. Not as a metaphor. It's literally dirt, though someone optimistically scattered straw to suggest cleanliness. It doesn't help. There are no booths, no servers, no menus. And quiet? Not a chance. This is a tavern after all, and it only offers two states, rowdy or closed for fire hazard. They spot an empty seat beside the hearth, at a wobbly bench damp with something best left unquestioned. Nearby, one patron debates a missing chicken, while another has passed out mid-sip, still holding a ladle. Under the table, a one-eyed mutt gnaws on a bone like it's paying rent. And this, friends, is only the beginning. They've barely stepped inside, and already the air suggests this might be a night to remember, or to completely forget. As the tavern door thuds shut behind them, the darkness closes in like a damp woolen cloak. It's warm, itchy, and vaguely untrustworthy. Their eyes adjust. Candlelight dances along soot-streaked walls, casting jittery shadows that make even stools look ready to start a fight. In the corner, a roaring hearth doubles as both a heater and a serious fire risk. Smoke curls lazily upwards, failing to find escape through a chimney that might be blocked by a long-deceased crow. But it's not the sound or warmth that hits hardest, it's the smell. The aroma isn't so much fragrant as it is emotional damage. The first wave is ale, warm, sharp, splashed onto every available surface. Beneath that, sweat. Not just from people, but horses. And perhaps something more questionable. Toss in hints of musty bread, damp hay, and the ghost of boiled onions. And one gets a scent that defies reproduction. The tabletops bear the scars of countless years. Initials, crude carvings, and knife gouges telling silent stories. They wobble with the confidence of furniture that survived generations. Benches creak beneath muddy boots, heavy cloaks, and even heavier decisions. And as promised, the floor remains dirt, just layered. Straw had been spread across the floor, meant to absorb spills, spittle, and the occasional unconscious guest. Each step required caution. A single misstep and a boot might sink into something better left undescribed. The room itself pulsed with noise and energy, a tangled organism of motion and chaos. In one shadowed corner, loud laughter erupted. In another, two men engaged in a heated debate over the proper cost of a pig. Nearby, a woman slammed down her mug, spilling most of it, and no one even blinked. A man seated at the next table stared ahead blankly, either contemplating the universe or forgetting how to use a chair. Then came a sudden sneeze. Instantly half the room leaned away in perfect silent unison. And yet despite what might offend a modern sense of comfort or hygiene, there was something undeniably inviting here. The place breathed. It was raw and noisy, completely unfiltered. A medieval gathering spot where hygiene took a back seat to community spirit, and shouting was practically a language. A seat was found, slightly damp, probably cursed. But for the moment it belonged to them. At first glance, the arrangement of furniture appeared to be the result of a mild earthquake, and whoever was in charge decided to leave it just so. There was no layout, no tidy bar area, and certainly no snug booths tucked in the back. Instead, one encountered a scattered collection of tables, stools, benches, barrels, and the occasional crate repurposed as seating. Everything seemed either far too close or awkwardly distant, depending on one's level of inebriation. The hearth stood out as the only real anchor. It roared against one wall, providing warmth, flickering light, and a generous serving of smoky air. Patrons gathered around it like moths drawn to comfort. Those who claimed the best spots kept them fiercely. Those who couldn't, well, that's what strong ale was for. The bar, if it could be called that, consisted of a hefty wooden plank laid across two barrels, buckling under the weight of mugs, jugs, and elbows. Behind it stood the tavern keeper, simultaneously pouring drinks, shouting commands, and casting a withering glare toward a man in the corner, the kind of stare that says, "You still owe me for last Tuesday." Menus didn't exist. One asked what was available and prepared for disappointment. The usual reply, ale or wait in silence. A narrow staircase, original to the structure and clearly splintery, led to rooms above. If they squinted, they might notice a boot dangling from the railing. Decorative or threatening, no one dared ask. Some taverns featured a back room. It could be for storage. It could host illicit gambling. Or it might be the last known location of someone who insulted the barmaid. Questions weren't encouraged. The walls bore heavy stains of candle soot. The windows were obscured by greasy rags or stretched hide. Every surface had been polished smooth, not by cloth but by generations of elbows, boots, spilled drinks, and possibly poultry. And somehow, in all the chaos, the system functioned. Everyone seemed to know when to speak up, where to sit, and when to duck. It lacked structure, yet pulsed with life. Each tavern had its ruler, not the nobleman or tax official, but the tavern keeper. No crown was needed, authority radiated from them. They were cook, accountant, mediator, and judge, and they kept order with steel will and sharper words. If the keeper was a man, he likely had the build of a wine barrel, rugged, grizzled, shaped by bad choices and salted meat. If a woman, and often it was, she had eyes sharper than a smith's chisel and could hush the room with a glance. Regardless, they had heard every story, witnessed worse, and cleaned blood from straw before breakfast. Regulars earned a nod. Strangers received wary assessment. Troublemakers met a mug to the skull. No ledger was needed. The tavern keeper tracked debts, drunks, and broken promises entirely in memory. Mood dictated mood. If they were cheerful, the room sang. If sour, it was wise to drink quickly and hold back jokes. They served as referee in disputes, judge of cheating hearts, and first to wield a club when fists began to fly. One didn't cross the tavern keeper. They also knew everything. Who owed money, who was sneaking about, and who had entered the village under a borrowed name. Need a name whispered in confidence? They'd better know who to ask, and they'd better be kind to the barkeep. In need of protection? Best to take a seat near them and mind their manners, hoping for a favour. Hopefully they didn't break a mug the week before. Some taverns had a helper, maybe a son, a daughter, a spouse, or even an orphan unofficially adopted, and now tasked with hauling barrels twice their own size. These helpers darted between tables, delivering drinks, wiping spills, and avoiding the heavy feet of clumsy patrons. So, while it might seem chaotic to outsiders, the tavern was actually a finely tuned little ecosystem. And at its centre, steady as a rock in the storm, stood the one person keeping both the ale flowing and the building from descending into pure bedlam. The tavern keeper. Eventually they managed to slide onto a wobbly bench, weaving between elbows and dodging a bit of spilled stew. Their throat ached from dryness, their boots still soggy from the road, and the time had come for the main attraction, the drink. But this wasn't a place for curated menus or crystal glassware. This was the Middle Ages. The beverage options were simple, warm, and potentially hazardous to one's health. First up, the ever-faithful ale, unfiltered, untamed, and often brewed in the back room, usually right next to the family dog. It arrived thick and murky, speckled with floating surprises, leftover grain, flecks of yeast, and perhaps a piece of someone's moustache. It was never cold, there was no ice, no one dared ask how long it had been in the barrel. They simply drank and hoped. Next came mead, honey wine. It sounded elegant, didn't it? In truth, it was sugary, strong, and occasionally explosive. If the tavern keeper brewed it themselves, the result might be heavenly, or it might taste like sorrow and bee venom. Mead was typically reserved for weddings, wealthy guests, or the overly dramatic bard demanding payment in gold or drink. Cider was another option, crafted from apples, whether fresh picked or forgotten on the orchard floor weeks ago. It was tart, sharp, and often ladled into mugs so chipped they could double as soup bowls by morning. It became the favourite in orchard-rich regions, or for anyone simply looking to forget the smell of the man beside them. And wine? Technically available. But unless the tavern sat somewhere in southern Europe, or received a visit from nobility, it was probably watered down, slightly sour, and offered with a side of sarcasm. Proper wine was reserved for bishops, lords, and lucky merchants who'd just sold a dozen crates of salt. Water, though, was the real gamble. Most of the time it carried invisible threats. Clean wells were scarce, and boiling water cost precious fuel. That's why even children drank ale. Not for the taste, but simply to survive to age 8 without dysentery. There were no bartenders counting shots or crafting fancy cocktails here. Drinks were served in mugs made of tin, clay, or wood, some still bearing the scent of last night's stew. They would raise the mug, take a sniff, then sip. Warm, bitter, oddly comforting. In a medieval tavern, if it was wet and didn't kill them immediately, it was considered a fine vintage. Once they braved the drink, hunger made its case. Their stomach grumbled, reminding them the last meal was mostly sadness and barley. It was time to eat, but expectations had to be managed. No menus, no waitstaff, and absolutely no inquiries about dietary needs. They didn't order food, they asked what remained and prayed it was hot and somewhat recognizable. The star dish was often pottage, a dense stew combining grains, root vegetables, and whatever meats could be found. It simmered in the same pot all week, ingredients added daily, nothing ever removed. Less a meal and more a historical archive. If meat was included, it was likely rabbit, pigeon, or an unfortunate chicken that wandered too close to the fire. Game meat varied, sometimes delightful, sometimes aged into mystery. Bowls were clay or wood. Spoons were optional. Fingers common. Most patrons carried personal knives, so dining was a bring-your-own-cutlery affair. As for napkins, try the sleeve of a tunic. Or, perhaps worse, a community rag that had seen too much. Bread made an appearance. Dark, dense, nearly weapon-like. If soft, it was freshly baked. If hard, it was baked last week. Either way, it paired with cheese that had the smell of an old boot and the attitude of a cat. Salted fish? Maybe. Pickled eggs? Sometimes. And now and then the tavern would offer a special, which, in kinder terms, simply meant we had too much of this lying around. Flavour was not guaranteed, and texture could range from comforting to concerning. Still, with flickering firelight casting warm glows on the walls, surrounded by lively noise and the weight of a warm bowl in their hands, it wasn't half bad. It was nourishing. It was steaming. And if they avoided scrutinizing what floated on the surface, the meal could even feel soothing. No one came here expecting luxury. They came to eat like survivors. Once they'd claimed a seat, preferably one without a knife still lodged in the wood, they started to notice what truly gave the tavern its pulse. The people. A medieval tavern, after all, was the original version of a social media timeline. Loud, disorganized, partly fictional, and brimming with oversharing. To their left, a flushed-faced farmer was already several ales deep, retelling for the 5th time the tale of his cow giving birth sideways. Mid-sentence, he slapped their shoulder like they'd known each other for years. or like they were filling in for his usual drinking pig. At the far end, a figure sat cloaked in shadows, nursing a mug and avoiding eye contact. Could have been a runaway monk, a bandit, or just someone socially awkward. Either way, no one made small talk with him, not unless they wanted to wake up behind the stables. Closer to the fire, a weary soldier, armour dented and stained, recounted tales of glory involving dragons, Frenchmen, and a magical sword. The story was clearly fabricated, but no one cared. His mug stayed full, and his audience howled with laughter. A merchant, sweaty, boisterous, shouted about grain prices no one had asked for, flashing coins like a man begging to be robbed before dawn. Nearby, two locals played dice on a crooked table. One cheated. The other noticed but said nothing, perhaps saving his outrage for after the ale ran out. In the corner, a bard strummed away, his voice faltering on high notes during a love song that sounded freshly invented. No one minded. He wore pants and played mostly in tune, which already made him an improvement over last night's performer. Women moved through the tavern, some working as staff, others pursuing ventures of their own. They were sharp-eyed, fearless, and not to be trifled with. They might smile, flirt, or land a punch, all depending on tone and timing. Children dashed under tables, snatching scraps or coins. No one stopped them. It was simply part of the rhythm. Everyone drank, watched, whispered, and pretended not to see the man snoring beneath the bench. This place was more than a venue for food and drink. It was a full-body experience, a living stage. And tonight they had unknowingly joined the cast. Forget ballads and lutes for a moment. The real soundtrack of the tavern was pure, unfiltered chaos. It began with the clatter of mugs, dozens slamming into wood, whether for toasts, wagers, or misjudged gestures. Some clanked merrily, others shattered completely. Both earned cheers. Next came the laughter. Deep, wild belly laughs that sounded like they belonged to woodland beasts. Most of the jokes didn't make sense. One farmer chuckled over a pun about hay. A knight giggled every time someone said pottage. A monk wheezed uncontrollably each time someone muttered duck. They quickly learned not to ask. Voices overlapped, rising in waves like cockerels in a dawn chorus. Arguments, tall tales, rants about taxes, even someone twisting scripture just to win a bet. Behind the barkeep barked orders while batting at flies. A barmaid shouted at a man who grabbed too much. From a distant table, a voice echoed, "Another round," as if issuing a command to soldiers. In the corner, the bard with a 3-stringed lute and a barely tuned soul repeated 4 chords endlessly, weaving lyrics about lost love, wandering chickens, and noblemen who wore their trousers backward. No one paid attention until he mentioned someone present. Then the room either burst into laughter or leaned into silence. Someone spilled their drink. Someone else belched loud enough to shake the beams. Another tumbled from a bench but continued their story from the floor. In the background, dogs barked. A goat bleated. No one knew why there was a goat. Chairs screeched across the packed dirt like thunder in a wooden canyon. It wasn't quiet, but it had rhythm. Now and then the entire tavern hushed, not by design but by accident. The pause lasted all of 3 seconds, before someone passed gas with heroic flair, and the music resumed. This wasn't background noise, it was a heartbeat, messy, loud, and joyously alive. And if one listened long enough, it began to make a strange kind of sense, harmony born from havoc. Like everything else in this place, it only got louder. The longer they linger, the more the atmosphere shifts. Once the ale has begun to flow and the stew settles comfortably in their bellies, the tavern begins to change shape. It's no longer merely a place to eat or drink. It becomes something akin to a medieval casino, only without velvet ropes and with far more shouting. Gambling takes center stage, and no one is left out. From grizzled soldiers to barefoot boys with borrowed dice, everyone joins the fray. There's no dealer, no watchful overseer, and certainly no rules. Just a battered wooden table, a few copper coins, and the unspoken truth that someone's dignity is about to be sacrificed. Dice are the favourite, carved from bone, wood, or whatever could be shaped in a hurry. They roll across the tables like thunder, each toss followed by laughter, groans, and the occasional accusation of witchcraft. Trust in the dice? Almost none. Use them anyway? Always. Then come the cards. In more refined neighbourhoods, one might find hand-painted decks, thick, worn at the corners, and always missing at least one card. Rules change depending on who explains them. One round, it's about reaching the highest number. The next, it's about matching symbols or possibly just bluffing convincingly enough. Imagine poker, but with more slapping. Wagers are as varied as the patrons. Coins, mugs, cloaks, even livestock. Someone once put up their goat. Someone else bet their boots. Another poor soul risked a night of freedom and lost. Regulars were slick. They shuffled smoothly, rolled slowly, and smiled far too innocently. Cheating? Oh, it was part of the charm. A hidden die here, a marked card there, a strategic cough at just the right moment. Win big, better by a round, or risk being escorted out by force. Lose badly, laugh it off and quietly inch toward the exit. Side contests sprang up just as quickly. Arm wrestling, thumb wars, and the ever-popular who can drink the most without collapsing. Victory earned applause. Defeat earned a place under the table, and a hangover lasting until the next market day. Even when the rules blurred and the stakes seemed ludicrous, the energy remained infectious. Because here, luck wasn't just a game. It was a dance with pride, coin purses, and occasionally one's trousers. As night deepened and the air grew thick with warmth and humidity, a different sort of show took over. One made of melody, words, and bold nonsense. This was story hour, medieval style. In a quiet corner, a bard cleared his throat, gently coaxing sound from a half-tuned lute, the strings whining like tired boots. He was missing several teeth, but not a shred of self-assurance. With a grand gesture, he began a ballad, a tale of heartbreak and valor, something involving a knight, a mermaid, and a poetic drowning. No one believed him. Everyone listened anyway. That was the unspoken rule here. Truth was optional. Entertainment was sacred. All around the room, others joined the chorus. They weren't bards, just locals with enough ale and audacity to share a tale. One swore he'd once wrestled a bear and survived to buy the first round. Another claimed to have witnessed a witch turn a cow into a goat. A third insisted he was related to Charlemagne on his mother's cousin's side. Every tale started the same way. You won't believe this, but... And they were right. No one did. But everyone wanted to. Boasts became songs. Accidents became legends. Someone told a joke so terrible it became funny. Another recited a poem, likely copied from a monk's manuscript. Applause followed, or hoots, or the occasional flying crust of bread, depending on performance quality. If fortune smiled, a professional might pass through. A scold or minstrel, travelling from town to town, trading music for coins and meals. Their tunes were polished, their stories long, and their ability to excite a crowd unmatched. But even they respected one golden rule: never let facts spoil a good tale. Within these smoky walls, where firelight danced and mugs clinked endlessly, storytelling was more than amusement. It was tradition. It was how bonds were formed, how reputations rose or fell, and how strangers became lifelong drinking companions. By midnight, half the room would be acting out the tale of a one-legged knight who defeated 6 highwaymen using only a soup ladle. They laughed. They cheered. They forgot it was all make-believe, because in this place, every liar became a legend, as long as the story was good enough. And as the ale kept pouring, something in the tavern shifted once more. The air thickened with the kind of liquid courage that only strong ale could provide. By the bard's third song, a dramatic tale of unfaithful shepherdesses, the crowd began to feel unusually sentimental. Welcome to medieval flirting. Subtlety had long since vanished. It often started with prolonged eye contact, or at least one eye squinting through a cloud of mead and hope. A man grinning with his last 2 teeth leaned across the bench and slurred, "My lady, your beauty burns brighter than the hearth." She responded without missing a beat by flinging a bread crust directly at his forehead. The room erupted in cheers. Others attempted charm in gentler ways, refilling mugs, offering awkward compliments, or trying to assist with a bowl of stew. It still spilled. Always. For any woman in the tavern, whether staff, guest, or travelling merchant, dodging affection came as second nature. 3 amateur poets, 2 arm wrestlers, and 1 man trying to balance a knife on his nose was a standard evening lineup. Sometimes the antics worked. More often they ended with a black eye or a lighter coin pouch. Yet beyond the clumsy flirtation, the tavern offered real companionship too. Courtesans moved with confidence, reading the room with ease, knowing who had gold, who had charm, and who would be unconscious before reaching the stairs. Deals were discreet, implications were not. And jealousy? Always nearby. Nothing triggered a tavern brawl faster than a jealous glance, a wandering hand, or a husband catching his wife laughing too loudly at a bard's joke about bishops. Tables were upended. Mugs became missiles. A bench broke. Again. Still, in the middle of this chaos, something real would sometimes bloom. A quiet baker's daughter and a wandering stonemason shared a moment over stew. 2 inebriated farmers discovered mutual hatred for turnips. A monk accidentally charmed a nun. In this raucous world, romance was a blend of charm, chance, and avoiding faceplants mid-sentence. Some hearts were won, others bruised. But all would be remembered, or at least exaggerated come morning. Then, inevitably, something tipped. Perhaps a spilled mug, or a whispered accusation of cheating at dice. Maybe 2 people claimed the same bench. Perhaps someone mentioned someone else's mother, or their goat. The spark didn't matter. What mattered was what came next. The tavern, once humming with song and stories, turned on a dime. A stool launched, a tankard hit the floor. Someone bellowed, "Hold my bread!" before flinging themselves across a bench with the grace of a tipsy catapult. Surprise was absent. Few even paused their drinking. Tavern brawls weren't rare. They were expected, practically built into the night's programming. Despite the violence, they were rarely dangerous. Most fights were more theatrical than lethal. Punches flew, but so did bodies, usually into stew bowls. Hair got pulled, beards were yanked, shirts ripped. The tavern keeper shouted like a war general, gripping a ladle in one hand and a club in the other. Occasionally someone joined the scuffle, without a clue why. Simply caught in the moment. Others sat back, placed casual bets, or moved their ale out of the danger zone. Weapons rarely drawn. Everyone knew that flashing a blade might turn harmless chaos into bloody legend. And nobody wanted to get barred from the only place serving hot food and warm drink. Eventually someone hit the ground and didn't get back up. Someone else leaned into the wall and declared that spot their new home. Just like that, the fight fizzled out, fast and without drama. And here's the strange bit. Once over, it was over. Fists relaxed, mugs refilled, a song picked up again. Within 10 minutes, laughter filled the room, even from the one with the bloody nose. There were no lawsuits, no grudges, just bruises, new stories, and perhaps a fresh nickname, like One-Eyed Arnold or Benchbreaker Bill. Because in a medieval tavern, a good brawl wasn't an interruption. It was tradition, wild, absurd, and somehow deeply bonding. And if nobody limped too badly, it was chalked up as just another form of entertainment. The chaos settled. The bard, mid-ballad, had passed out on his own loot. Their belly was full of mystery stew and cider just beginning to ferment. It was time to sleep, or at least an attempt at it, eventually comes. But no one expects feather mattresses or linens perfumed with lavender. This is a medieval tavern, not a noble retreat. If lodging is offered at all, it's likely reached by a crooked staircase, leading past slanted floors and ceiling beams eager to test the strength of one's skull. Upstairs the rooms are modest, cold, and unquestionably shared. Personal space is not a concept here. They lie shoulder to shoulder with strangers, some snoring like cathedral bells, others murmuring dreams in unfamiliar tongues. As for beds, technically yes. In practice they're thin, straw-filled sacks, lumpy and often alive with what medieval folks casually referred to as companions. They sleep fully dressed, boots on, with a dagger tucked beneath the pillow, not for comfort, but as a precaution. Blankets are communal, as are the odors. And if garlic was eaten earlier, and someone always had garlic, it joins the dreamscape intimately. Those without coin or too far gone to climb the stairs find rest downstairs, on benches beneath tables, or curled by the hearth beside a dog of questionable ownership. There's no real silence. Even after the last cup is drained and the last bruise is bandaged, the tavern breathes. Someone mumbles in sleep. A log splits in the fire. A distant snore echoes off the rafters. Somehow, despite the clutter and noise, slumber arrives. It's neither clean nor cozy, but it's warm enough. The fire holds back the worst of the cold. The tavern keeper remains half awake, club in hand, watchful. And that background hum of life becomes its own strange lullaby, familiar, human, alive. They wake with stiff necks, dry mouths, and bruises that feel both mysterious and well-earned. But for those few hours they slept, surrounded by wanderers, labourers, and fools. No kings, no silence, just straw, dreams, and the quiet hope their boots remain by morning. Dawn slips in like an unwanted guest, nudging light through shutter cracks and poking at eyelids with pale fingers. The tavern has changed, not exactly silent, but quieter, subdued by exhaustion. One eye opens, there's a boot resting on their chest, someone nearby murmurs something about sheep taxes. Under the table, the bard clutches his lute like a lover, snoring contentedly. A chicken pecks at old crusts scattered across the floor. No one questions where it came from. The fire has dwindled to grey embers, leaving the air chill and tinged with smoke. A few begin to stir, groaning like soldiers who fought battles solely in their dreams. One man sits up, surveys the room, and lies back down. Concluding the day can wait. Naturally, the tavern keeper is already awake, clanging mugs, sweeping up straw, and reheating whatever stew remains in a pot that smells both nourishing and mildly vengeful. They glance over the sleeping bodies and bang a ladle against a tankard like a war horn from the underworld. That's the wake-up call. Up or out. No breakfast spread awaits. If fortune smiles, there's still some pottage. Thicker now, almost solid. Bread is slightly warmer than it was last night. Ale is weaker, and complaints are few. No one has the energy. Some simply dunk their faces into a rain barrel outside and call it hygiene. Pouches are checked. 2 coins and a button. Better than expected. Boots? Present. One now bears bite marks, but they're still wearable. A victory, all things considered. A few early risers wander in. Travellers, labourers, or souls in need of something strong before facing livestock, taxes, or nosy neighbours. The tavern begins to breathe again, slowly rousing like a creature waking from hibernation. Someone retells a tale from the night before. It has already evolved. Now there were 2 fights. The bard's song summoned a ghost. Everyone nods, not because it's true, but because it's possible. The night was wild. The morning is sour and sluggish, and yet there's a smile on someone's face. They survived it. They felt the heat, the smoke, the sticky ale clinging to worn souls. They made it through the shouting, the blushing, the stew, and possibly a flying bench. And in that moment, something becomes beautifully clear. The medieval tavern wasn't just a place for ale. It was the heartbeat of a village. In a world without phones, newspapers, or social scrolls, this was where stories lived. A merchant could bring news from distant shores. A soldier could describe war's front lines. A bard could stitch a village together with song, even if the lyrics changed nightly. This was the place for... It was connection in its rawest form. Farmers lifted mugs beside blacksmiths. Pilgrims tore bread with thieves. By the second round, strangers often turned into companions, or at least temporary drinking allies. In this place, the lines between class and custom faded. Rumours sparked, alliances took shape, and grudges either dissolved or deepened depending on the throw of the dice. The tavern was not just about drink. Business unfolded here too. Agreements were sealed over sticky tables, contracts formed with handshakes between cider, spills and splinters. It served as a courtroom, a confessional booth, and a stage, all rolled into one. Within a single night, someone might secure a job, misplace a coin pouch, get married, or begin a lifelong feud. And it offered something even more precious, something not found in markets or behind chapel walls. It offered relief. Relief from the biting cold, the relentless toil, and the unending seriousness of medieval existence. For a few short hours, they could warm themselves by the hearth, chuckle at a foolish joke, hum along to a poorly sung song, and briefly forget the harsh world outside. Even if the ale lacked chill, the bedding scratched like thistle, and the stew had more bone than broth, the tavern reminded them they were still alive, surrounded by others doing their best to stay that way too. In an age where plague, war, or even a bad frost could end a life overnight, that reminder meant everything. So when one stepped into a medieval tavern, they weren't merely purchasing a drink. They were investing in something deeper, the feeling of belonging, the sharing of stories, and, if the floor wasn't too full, perhaps a warm spot to sleep beside the fire's final embers. Long before cafes, pubs, or coffee houses dotted the world, there was the tavern, loud, imperfect, honest, and unforgettable. Before she became one of the most iconic women in the ancient world, her likeness immortalized in limestone, with regal cheekbones and a gaze both serene and commanding, Nefertiti was shrouded in enigma. Her name, the Beautiful One Has Come, hints at mystery, but her true origins remain unsolved. Some believe she was the daughter of a powerful Egyptian advisor named Ai, perhaps even a sister to the man she would marry, Akhenaten. Others suggest she was a foreign princess, sent to Egypt through diplomacy and marriage. Wherever she came from, one thing remains undisputed: her influence changed history. Nefertiti didn't emerge gradually in the records. She appeared like a flash of light, sudden, radiant, transformative. Her presence beside Akhenaten wasn't ornamental. She was a partner in rule. Together they upended centuries of spiritual belief, dismantling the familiar pantheon of Egyptian gods in favor of the Aten, the solar disk, elevated as the sole divine power. It was a revolutionary, almost heretical shift. And Nefertiti wasn't a distant figure watching from the throne. She led sacred rituals, made offerings, and was even portrayed in battle scenes, roles traditionally held by kings. Unlike many queens whose presence faded into the background, Nefertiti's image dominated the art of her era, more so than Akhenaten's himself. These depictions did not cast her as obedient or demure. She stood tall, often drawn as larger than life, wielding authority openly. In a society where pharaohs were worshipped as gods, her closeness to Akhenaten, politically and spiritually, suggested something more profound. Perhaps she wasn't simply a queen, perhaps she ruled alongside him. Yet such a rise came with resistance. Egypt wasn't prepared. The old priesthood resented the loss of power, the abandonment of their temples and rituals. The capital shifted to a new purpose-built city, Akhetaten, now Amarna, symbolizing a severing from the past. And through it all, Nefertiti remained central. Her likeness was carved into temple walls, her name echoed in hymns to the sun. But her exit from history is where the mystery truly deepens. There's no confirmed tomb, no mummy, no definitive end. Just silence, as though the world, after witnessing her brilliance, chose to look away. And perhaps that is when her legend was truly born. To understand her rise, one must first meet the man who rewrote Egypt's story, Pharaoh Akhenaten. He wasn't always known by that name. Born Amenhotep IV, he entered the world as a royal prince, destined to... He inherited a legacy that had endured for over 1,000 years, a civilization bound to its gods, anchored in tradition. But something deep within him began to shift. Some call it divine revelation, others madness. When he rose to the throne, he turned away from the powerful deity Amun and declared a radical new belief, that only one god was worthy of worship, the sun itself, Aten. This wasn't merely a theological revision, it was a seismic event that fractured the core of Egyptian society. Imagine a world built on temples, priests, and age-old rituals being told, overnight, that their gods were false, their offerings meaningless. Akhenaten didn't merely promote monotheism, he demanded it. Temples honouring Amun were shut down. His name was scraped from stone walls, idols were toppled, cities once sacred were left behind. In their place, Akhenaten constructed something wholly new. Akhetaten, a city devoted to Aten, designed so that each sunrise would spill light directly through the cliffs and into its heart. And through all of this, Nefertiti was not a silent figure in the background. She stood beside him, not as decoration, but as co-architect of this spiritual upheaval. Reliefs from the era show her reverently worshipping Aten, her gestures mirroring Akhenaten's. Their daughters appear often, heads tilted toward the sun's rays, captured in scenes that felt more like family portraits than propaganda. Art itself transformed. No longer stiff and formal, it became fluid, stylized, even tender. The king and queen were shown embracing, playing with their children, offering prayers in soft linen robes beneath the shining orb. In this reimagined Egypt, Nefertiti was everywhere, and sometimes even more prominent than her husband. Historians have long debated her influence. Some believe she wielded real political authority, perhaps even serving as co-regent. Inscriptions mention a figure named Neferneferuaten, possibly a name she adopted when ruling independently. Whether Akhenaten shared his crown out of love, necessity, or strategy is unknown. But one thing remains clear. Without her, this bold experiment in monotheism might not have endured as long as it did. Yet revolutions are fragile things. Gods do not yield easily to exile, and the people watched quietly, waiting for familiar order to return. By the peak of her power, Nefertiti had become more than queen. She had become a living symbol, not just of beauty, but of divine femininity, spiritual leadership, and royal strength. Egypt had known powerful queens, Mose-Nefertari, Hatshepsut. But Nefertiti's role was different. She didn't seize power through war or manipulate from the shadows. She helped reshape the kingdom's very soul, standing beside her husband in real time, like a goddess made flesh. Together they had 6 daughters, Meritaten, Meketaten, Ankesenpaten, and others, frequently shown in the art of the time, playing or praying beneath Aten's beams. But curiously, no sons were confirmed. In a culture fixated on succession, this was a glaring absence. Was it fate, or something more complicated? Some speculate Akhenaten had sons with other consorts. Others, more controversially, have suggested that Nefertiti herself may have borne sons, theories that drift into the uncertain space between scholarly inference and myth. What is certain, however, is that motherhood was central to her image. In sculptures and carvings, she is seen cradling her children, their small hands reaching up to her face. These aren't cold depictions. They are tender, intimate, radiant, moments of life captured in stone. In a world where pharaohs were distant and divine, Nefertiti's portrayal as a warm, nurturing mother brought humanity into the heavens. But there was another side to her iconography, one far more commanding. In several reliefs, she dons the blue war crown, traditionally worn by kings. She is seen smiting enemies, steering chariots, making sacred offerings, all without Akhenaten beside her. These weren't symbolic roles. They were declarations. It whispered a quiet revolution. Perhaps she was preparing not just to assist in rule, but to lead alone. As Akhenaten's health declined, possibly from hereditary illness or unrelenting stress, it's believed Nefertiti assumed greater control. But this is where her trail begins to blur. In the final years of his reign, she disappears. There are no grand funerals recorded, no confirmed tomb, no final words carved into stone. She simply fades. Did she die? Was she removed from power? Or, more mysteriously, was she on the brink of becoming something even greater than queen? Something that history tried and failed to erase. For a time, Nefertiti was everywhere. Carved into stone, sung about in sacred hymns, ruling beside one of history's most unconventional pharaohs. And then, as if swept away by the desert wind, she vanished. No Egyptian queen before her had been so prominently depicted. Yet around the 12th year of Akhenaten's 17-year reign, something shifted. The records grew silent. Her name no longer appeared in inscriptions. Her image disappeared from the art. No tomb, no written eulogy, no mourning ritual carved in stone. For someone so central to Egypt's dramatic religious revolution, her sudden absence was more than peculiar. It was a void, a silence that echoed louder than any monument. What became of her? One explanation suggests the simplest truth: she died. Childbirth was perilous, even for royalty. Around the same time Nefertiti disappears, her second daughter, Meketaten, also fades from record. Perhaps a tragic dual loss, mother and child claimed by the same cruel hour. And yet that theory leaves a glaring question. Why no grand farewell? No temple tribute? No funeral rites for a woman worshipped in life almost as a goddess? A quiet passing doesn't match the figure history remembers. Other theories turn toward politics. Perhaps Nefertiti lost her place within the court. Akhenaten, increasingly isolated, may have distanced himself from her, favouring another companion. Some accounts mention a mysterious co-ruler named Smenkhkare, who appears briefly in historical sources and then vanishes. Was this figure a half-brother, a male heir, or something more intriguing? One theory suggests Smenkhkare wasn't a man at all, but Nefertiti under a new identity. It's a tantalizing idea, that she didn't disappear, but instead transformed. In the closing years of Akhenaten's reign, an individual named Neferuaten assumed royal duties. This ruler used feminine titles and, in some inscriptions, referred to Akhenaten as her beloved husband. Could this have been Nefertiti, crowned pharaoh in her own right? If so, she would have joined the ranks of Egypt's rare female monarchs, like Hatshepsut before her. But even this theory unravels too soon. Neferuaten's reign ends without clear explanation, and then a more familiar name takes the stage. Tutankhaten, later known as Tutankhamun, a boy king, barely old enough to grasp a scepter, ascends the throne. He would become Egypt's most famous pharaoh, not for his deeds, but for the pristine, treasure-filled tomb he left behind. But here one question lingers. Who was his mother? The historical record provides no definitive answer. Akhenaten is widely accepted as the father, but the identity of the mother is far less certain. Some propose Nefertiti as his stepmother. Others suggest she may have been his biological mother, pointing to depictions and timelines placing her near the child during her final public years. If she was indeed his mother, it would make sense. Tutankhamun's early reign bore signs of guidance, careful, deliberate reversals of Akhenaten's monotheistic legacy. These decisions were not those of a child. Someone experienced was behind them, someone fluent in ritual, politics, and symbolism. Could it have been Nefertiti, operating from behind the scenes? Or was it I, the high priest and possible father of Nefertiti herself? Perhaps both worked in tandem, not for ambition but for stability, to quietly restore Egypt's old gods and erase the chaos of Amarna. One of the more compelling clues comes from a golden shrine discovered in Tutankhamun's tomb. It portrays a woman anointing the young king. Her features, graceful and distinct, resemble Nefertiti's. If it was her, it would mean she never truly left. She simply stepped into the background, still close to the throne, still holding power, but in a quieter form. And yet, without a named burial site, without formal closure, her story remains unfinished. A queen whose name once echoed across Egypt, now draped in mystery. No final chapter, no resting place, just broken statues, forgotten titles, and a legacy that continues to spark questions. She stepped into history with brilliance, reshaped a kingdom, and then slipped away. But legends aren't always born in death. Sometimes they begin with disappearance. Without a confirmed mummy, we are left only with scattered fragments. If she truly guided Tutankhamun during his reign, her influence remains visible, yet her name has been wiped clean, erased from temple walls, omitted from royal lists, as if someone had tried to erase all trace of a woman who once ruled with divine authority. And yet the irony is striking. Tutankhamun's fame would eventually resurrect her memory. In the process of uncovering his legacy, the world stumbled into hers. For someone who stood at the heart of Egypt's most radical transformation, queen, priestess, perhaps even pharaoh, Nefertiti left behind no known resting place. Not a single tomb has been confirmed. No funerary texts, no sarcophagus, no burial mask inscribed with her final prayers. It's as though she faded into air. This absence has perplexed Egyptologists for over a century, in a civilization built around preparation for the afterlife, where even minor nobles were embalmed, encased and entombed with care. How could one of the most powerful women in ancient history simply vanish? Theories abound. One possibility suggests her burial was hurried and devoid of ceremony. perhaps in the final chaotic years of the Amarna period. With Akhenaten's legacy deemed dangerous, her own memory may have become a threat. Her tomb might have been dismantled, her name chiseled away, part of a broader campaign to erase the memory of Egypt's brief experiment with monotheism. After all, when the traditional gods returned, revenge was often taken in stone, and names, the heart of memory, were the first to be destroyed. Another theory, so more compelling to many, proposes her tomb was never truly lost, only misidentified or yet to be revealed. Some scholars believe she lies hidden within the Valley of the Kings, perhaps mere feet away from Tutankhamun himself. In 2015, radar scans of KV-62, Tutankhamun's tomb, hinted at hidden chambers behind its painted walls. Could Nefertiti rest there still, behind an unbroken seal, untouched for millennia? The idea captured imaginations around the world. A queen resting just out of reach, a mystery folded beneath gold and dust. Egyptologists held their breath. But subsequent scans proved inconclusive. Excavations slowed, funding dwindled. And once more, Nefertiti slipped back into silence. Yet her absence continues to speak volumes. Her face survives, and at dozens, even hundreds of depictions remain. Her image lingers in stone carvings and coloured pigments, and most famously her bust, now displayed in Berlin, still holds the gaze of the world, poised with an almost supernatural grace behind museum glass, as though she waits, as though she knows. Each year, archaeologists return to Amarna and the Valley of the Kings. Each year, rumours swirl. Could a sealed chamber finally reveal its secret? Could forgotten cartouches in layers of sand spell out her true name? Or is Nefertiti destined to remain Egypt's most enduring riddle, a sentence cut short in the grand narrative of a civilization? If history attempted to bury her, it failed. Because the search for Nefertiti has never truly ceased, it has only grown deeper, more determined. And why, without a tomb or a known body, do they still remember her? The answer stands quietly in Berlin's Neues Museum, beneath soft gallery lights, a painted bust of limestone, rediscovered in 1912, that has mesmerized the world for over a century. Nefertiti, her eyes serene and watchful, her long neck regal, the iconic blue crown unmistakable, her features so refined, so modern, they defy time. One eye remains unfinished, perhaps by choice, perhaps an oversight from the sculptor's final days. But even incomplete, she is whole in presence. The bust was unearthed by German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt inside the ruins of sculptor Thutmose's studio at Amarna. Upon brushing away the dust and seeing her face, he wrote simply in his journal, "No use describing it, you have to see it." And the world did. In doing so, Nefertiti became more than a queen. She became an icon, a symbol of beauty, of enigma, of ancient power rediscovered. Yet even her most famous likeness is not without dispute. Germany acquired the bust during a time when antiquities laws were loosely enforced. Egypt has been requesting its return for decades. To Egyptians, she belongs at home, in the land where the sun once touched her skin, where she stood beneath Aten's rays. Germany insists she is too fragile to travel. Others suggest it's about prestige. Nefertiti draws crowds. She is to many their Mona Lisa. Still, wherever she resides, in memory, in stone, or in hidden chambers, her presence has changed how the world sees Egypt, and how Egypt sees itself. The way the world views ancient women often feels limited. But Nefertiti was never merely a passive beauty. Her famous bust captures something more. A regal authority, an assertiveness that almost dares the viewer to look away. She seems like someone who kept secrets, made choices, and reshaped the fate of empires. And indeed she did. It's astonishing how a single sculpture, fragile and silent, has the power to bring someone back from the brink of oblivion. We may never uncover her tomb. Her manner of death might remain forever unknown. But through this bust, Nefertiti achieved something few others have. A kind of immortality. Not wrapped in gold, but alive in the human mind. The sculpture may be still, but the story it holds continues to echo louder than ever. carrying her voice across thousands of years. Her legacy lives in the space between stone and silence, suspended somewhere between historical fact and timeless wonder. Few women from antiquity have generated such relentless curiosity and enduring mystery. She is both deeply documented and deeply unknowable. Over centuries, she has been reimagined in many forms. To some, she became a divine being in mortal form, the very personification of celestial beauty. To others, she was a strategist, perhaps even the true mind behind the throne. Or perhaps the throne itself. She's been painted as a tragic romantic figure, swallowed by revolution. Elsewhere, she's portrayed as a calculating leader, holding together a crumbling kingdom with elegance and precision. But what do we actually know? What's certain is that she was more than a consort. Her image rivals those of the kings she stood beside. Her presence in religious processions, coronation scenes, and even battle imagery reveals someone not simply adjacent to power, but holding it. In a male-dominated world, she didn't seize control with force, but through presence, influence, and mastery of the symbolic language of her time. We know she stood at the center of Egypt's most daring religious experiment. While Akhenaten conceived of a sun-centered faith, it was Nefertiti who gave it a human form. She didn't just serve Aten, she embodied the divine, acting as a radiant bridge between deity and people. Through her, monotheism became tangible and reverent. And we know that when she vanished, her legacy was nearly extinguished. The backlash against Akhenaten's regime was swift, and she too was swept away. Her statues shattered, her inscriptions marred, her name struck from the record, deliberately forgotten. And yet, here we are, 3,000 years later, still speaking her name. Why? Because legend survives where stone fails. Because when a woman becomes both symbol and mystery, she steps into a realm untouched by time. Because, in some cases, questions resonate more powerfully than answers. And perhaps, just perhaps, that's how Nefertiti intended it. To be remembered, not reduced, admired, not explained. Not the occupant of one tomb, but a queen whose story lives through endless interpretation. Millennia have passed since she last walked beneath the Egyptian sky, and yet her presence still touches the modern world. Her shadow lingers in the glass of museums, through university halls, on the pages of novels, and within countless documentaries. Unlike most ancient figures, she has not faded. She has grown. What draws us in isn't only her beauty we've seen before, it's the mystery, the deliberate gaps in her story. They feel like riddles she left behind, as if challenging each new generation to try and solve them, fully aware that no one ever will. That's what makes her timeless. Every era has reshaped her to reflect its own values. In the early 20th century, she was viewed as an exotic, submissive queen. Later, in times of feminist awakening, she emerged as a symbol of lost female authority, a ruler silenced by patriarchy. In today's culture, she's been reimagined again, as a fashion icon, a black queen, a diplomat, even a pharaoh. She has lived countless second lives, not through certainty, but through imagination. And perhaps that is the most fitting afterlife of all. In ancient Egypt, to be eternal wasn't about mummification alone. It was about remembrance. If the name was spoken, the image seen, the tale retold, the person endured. They passed into the afterlife. They dined with gods. They continued. By design or fate, Nefertiti has reached that threshold. Her name is still spoken across continents. Her face, one of the most recognized in human history. Her story, fractured, elusive, continues to command attention. And so perhaps her legacy wasn't sealed in a tomb or etched beneath the desert sands. It lived instead in the questions she left behind. Nefertiti became the perfect enigma. A life glimpsed, partially erased, and entirely unforgettable. And perhaps that was her final act of mastery, not only to reign over an empire, reshape a faith, or raise royal daughters, but to become eternal. Nefertiti, the beautiful one who came, never truly departed. She endures in curiosity, in wonder, in the deep human need to remember the women whom history once tried to silence. Her memory doesn't rest in gold or grand monuments. It thrives in the enduring act of being sought. And what form of immortality could be more powerful than that? Half a world away, in southern China, where the skies hang low and the wind sighs through bamboo groves, another legend curls through the mountains. But this dragon is no myth. It breathes no fire. It was not born but built, from earth, stone, and human devotion. This is the dragon's backbone, the Longji rice terraces, sculpted with patience by generations of calloused hands. Locals gave it that name, inspired by its elegant ridgelines that ripple down the slopes like the scales of a sleeping serpent. Water, rice, and centuries of care shimmer across its form. From afar, the hills roll with such grace they seem alive, rising and falling in rhythm, like the sinews of something slumbering beneath. But draw near, and life becomes even more vivid. Water trickles through narrow channels. Young rice stalks sway in the breeze, and at dawn, mists weave across the landscape, rising softly like the breath of the dragon itself. These terraces were never the result of haste. Their story began more than 700 years ago, when the Zhuang and Yao peoples, ethnic groups deeply connected to the mountains, chose to adapt rather than abandon. With little flat land and no machines, they looked to the slopes and asked a question both simple and profound. How do we eat here? The answer unfolded over centuries. Armed with bamboo baskets, stone tools, and relentless resolve, they carved the hills, inch by inch, season by season. Each new level wasn't just construction. It was instruction. They taught the land to yield, to flow, to feed. Rain became resource. Elevation became opportunity. And rice, the heartbeat of their culture, began to grow where once only gravity reigned. Soon the terraces came to resemble a resting dragon, strong, sacred, and eternal. But these were more than fields. They were an agreement. A quiet contract between people and place. Every contour followed the earth's logic. No section was forced. Instead, they listened. They shaped with care, not conquest. Today, the dragon's backbone continues to nourish entire villages. But beyond its utility, it serves as a quiet reminder. Patience still has power. In a world that races forward, here stands a dragon that was never pursued, only gently revealed layer by layer, vision by vision. To walk among the Longji terraces is to step into a landscape shaped not by machines, but by memory. There are no mechanical scars, no surveyor's flags, only the enduring fingerprints of human resilience. Every slope, every stone, every gentle arc was placed by hands that understood the rhythm of the land. When the Zhuang and Yao first beheld these steep and stubborn hills, they didn't see limitation. They saw potential. The valleys were already claimed. But up among the ridges they sensed promise. If they could make the earth listen, it might speak in grain. So they began. With wooden shovels, stone hoes, and baskets balanced on shoulders worn smooth by time. Slowly the mountain changed. Terraces took shape, like veins stretched horizontally across its body, each one supported by walls stacked stone by stone. Nothing here was guessed. Every line was calculated. Every drop of water was invited to stay, not spill. One misstep and a section might collapse. Too steep, and the water would flee. Too flat, and it would stagnate. Precision mattered because life depended on it. Stagnation was never an option. They didn't measure with rulers, but with inherited intuition passed down through generations. The young learned by watching their elders, while the elders observed the rhythm of seasons. In time, the mountain yielded, not out of defeat, but in quiet trust. What emerged was a landscape that seemed to bend nature, yet harmonized with it instead. From the valley floor to the mist-kissed peaks, the terraces ascend like a winding stairway to the clouds. They echo the contours of the land so seamlessly it almost seems the mountain birthed them. Yet, it wasn't nature that molded these forms. It was human effort. No engines, no concrete, no scholarly blueprints, just patience, persistence, and the belief that even the steepest land could nurture life. To this day, the terraces are alive, still tilled, still mended, still revered. There are no bulldozers here, no modern shortcuts. The old methods endure not because they resist progress, but because they've withstood time itself. Tradition, when rooted deep, becomes stronger than any storm. If the dragon's spine is formed by muscle and stone, then water serves as its lifeblood. It moves without noise or machinery, tracing ancient paths carved from the high springs above, slipping silently into each level below. This fluid dance isn't accidental. It's the unseen heartbeat of the terraces, the reason they have lasted centuries. High above, where rain meets rock, natural springs are caught in narrow trenches and earthen canals. Gravity then becomes a quiet partner to the farmers. Water flows down tier by tier, gently pooling in each paddy before spilling into the next. This design, graceful and uninterrupted, ensures that every plot receives exactly what it needs. No more, no less. No switches or taps. Just hand-cut channels guided by memory and touch. A gate too tight, and one field floods. A crack too wide, and another dries. So, the villagers patrol the paths each day, listening with their feet, adjusting by instinct. It's less agriculture than symphony. Misplace one note, and the rhythm falters. But water does more than nourish, it reflects. In spring, as the paddies flood, their surfaces turn to glass. They catch the sky, the drifting clouds, and even distant constellations on a clear night. Travellers often call it otherworldly, as if the hills had become a breathing mirror that bridges earth and sky. Then summer comes, the reflection dissolves into waves of green, rice stalks ripple in the breeze, turning the fields into a sea of jade. Autumn brings gold, as the ripe grain glistens among retreating waters. And in winter, when all falls still, snow replaces current. The dragon slumbers, yet the veins remain, waiting. Time here moves differently. It's marked not in minutes but in moisture, in the slow melt of snow, in the croak of returning frogs, in the first earthy scent of spring. While the modern world races ahead, the people of Longji still read the seasons like old friends, understanding them not in numbers but in sensations. The dragon breathes not in fire but in the silent pulse of water, threading through sculpted land. Spring doesn't begin here with blooming flowers, but with flowing streams. Meltwater from the peaks trickles down, waking the terraces. The paddies glisten once more, the dragon stirs, and the villagers rise with it. There is no loud ritual, just movement, quiet, purposeful. Young and old step onto the paths as dawn rolls in. Straw hats dipped low, baskets swaying on backs, bare feet brushing along narrow ledges. The scent of wet soil mingles with the cool mountain breeze. Just days earlier, the fields had been flooded. Now they shine like green-tinted glass. Machines have no role here. They never have. Every seedling, carefully nurtured in nursery beds, is lifted and pressed into the earth by hand. One by one. Row by row. A gentle rhythm repeats, bend, reach, press, step, again, all day, sometimes for weeks. Nearby children splash and mimic these motions. They don't learn by reading, they learn by wading in. By feeling the mud, sensing the weight of water, seeing space through their eyes, not tape. Knowledge here is absorbed through experience. Planting isn't merely work, it's a rite. Offerings are made to the mountain spirits. Songs echo softly from the ridges. In certain villages, elders still scatter the first handfuls of rice into the water, blessing the soil. Each terrace planted becomes a quiet vow, a promise to the land and to the ones who came before. Ancestors pass their wisdom to those yet to come. The pace remains gentle. No one hurries the dragon, nor do they challenge the mountain's rhythm. Instead, planting unfolds like a meditation, a steady dance uniting people and nature, filled with intention and care. Gradually, green sprouts begin to rise from the mirrored fields like whispered promises. From this moment onward, the terraces will nurture more than just rice. They cultivate hope. Each seed is a silent offering. Every row is a quiet resistance to hunger and haste. And so the cycle resumes, not with noise or flame, but with fingers in soil and hearts lifted skyward. The dragon stirs. The mountain breathes. The future is sown, one seed at a time. Scattered along the curved ridgelines and cradled within the terraces lie the lifeblood of the dragon's spine. Villages like Ping'an, Dajai, and Jingkeng. These aren't merely clusters of homes, they are living testaments to cultural memory, where every beam, path, and porch clings to the mountainside like a story too precious to forget. The houses, built from wood and raised on stilts, guard against the rain and the mountain's steep embrace. Their rooftops, dark and gently sloped, echo the lines of the terraces below. From above they resemble wooden lanterns adrift on green waves. Life inside these homes is simple, warm, and deeply rooted in community. Multiple generations share rooms. Meals are prepared over wood fires. The air carries the scent of rice wine and bamboo smoke. The villagers are primarily of ethnic minority groups, the Zhuang and the Red Yao, each rich with unique language, customs, and traditions. Red Yao women are easily recognized. Their long black hair, never cut since childhood, is coiled into elegant buns atop their heads. Some release it like waterfalls when bathing in the river, a vision so poetic it feels almost mythical. Even as modernity climbs the mountain paths, tradition stands resilient. Clothes are still dyed by hand in deep indigo. Wooden looms creak softly in quiet homes. Reed pipes and bronze drums carry music during festivals. Weddings are celebrated with age-old dances. Harvests are greeted with joyful song. Here, hospitality isn't a formality, it's instinct. Guests are welcomed with mountain tea, rice wine served in carved gourds, and tales shared by elders who recall life before electricity. They speak of dragons in the mist, of ancestors who carved the slopes, of spirits who still walk the fields. Though tourists now arrive from far and wide, the heartbeat of village life continues, almost untouched. The rice grows, the festivals return with the seasons. These terraces and their people do not resist change. They absorb it, slowly, mindfully, like water stepping down from one level to the next. Here, within the embrace of the dragon, life does not rush. It flows, it lingers, it remembers. To wander through Longji's terraces is to step into a tapestry of myth. These hills are more than earth and stone. They are breathing landscapes filled with stories, carried by the wind, whispered through the bamboo. To the villagers, these mountains aren't just ground to stand upon. They are sacred beings, shaped by deities, guarded by spirits, and alive with legends passed down from parent to child. One enduring tale speaks of a dragon lying asleep across the ridges. Its spine, they say, forms the terraced hills. Locals believe these curves weren't crafted by hands alone, but are the dragon's very scales, lifting and falling with each breath. When the mist glides up from the valley and drapes the paddies in white, it is said that the dragon dreams, breathing softly. Another story tells of how the terraces began through divine compassion. During a time of starvation, the people climbed the peaks and pleaded for help. The gods, moved by their sincerity, sent rain and instructed them to carve the hills into steps where rice might thrive. Obeying the ancestors began their work, guided by a dragon who appeared to lead them. From that day, the mountain has been treated with reverence. No one shouts in the fields. Trees are not felled without first offering prayer. These beliefs aren't found in written records. They echo in the melodies sung during planting, in the incense burned before the season begins, in the hush of foggy mornings. Children grow up with these stories, not as mere fables, but as truths etched into the terrain. To mock the dragon is to tempt poor harvests. To ignore the spirits is to summon flood or famine. Because within these hills, spirits are never far away. The water too. Some farmers still make offerings before releasing the spring water into the terraces for the first time each year. A few drops of rice wine, a quiet prayer whispered almost absent-mindedly. It isn't performed for spectacle, just tradition, simple, instinctive, like tying a shoe. And whether dragons exist or not, there's something sacred in the air. Perhaps it's the hush, or the drifting mist, or perhaps it's the deep, calm sense that this place is more than just a feat of human labour. It's a living story, unfolding through stone, water, and rice. For hundreds of years, the dragon's spine lay hidden, its truth known only to those who lived nestled among the hills. But no secret, no matter how revered, stays untouched forever. Roads reached it, wires crept in. Visitors followed, clutching phones and cameras as they ascended beside the farmers. And the terraces, ancient proud, faced a new question: how to exist in the age of modernity. At first, there was unease. Some feared commercialization would slice up the mountain, that timber homes would yield to concrete, that traditions might become staged performances. Yet the people of Longji didn't resist change by retreating from it. They responded with a quiet resilience, integrating the present into the past, one thoughtful gesture at a time. Instead of becoming attractions, homes became havens. Guests stayed not in hotels, but among families. Meals came from nearby fields, sticky rice steamed in bamboo, wild greens gathered at dawn. Nights passed in timber stilt houses, roosters still the morning alarm. The experience wasn't curated, it was sincere, grounded. Meanwhile, farming continued. Locals still flooded the terraces, still planted by hand, still harvested with age-worn sickles. Children attended classes by day and returned to help at dusk. Tourism supported livelihoods, yes, but rice remained the foundation. One nurtures the wallet, the other the soul. Some young people left, but many returned. The terraces pull at something deep, not just memory but presence. It's in the music of water trickling through channels, in stars mirrored in flooded fields. In the way these mountains insist on patience. The festivals may be louder now. Microphones replace drums. Multilingual signs mark sacred spots. Yet the rituals remain. Offerings continue. Elders still guide the singing. The dragon's spine didn't reject change. It absorbed it, moved with it, adapted but didn't fracture. While many traditions fade in progress shadow, Longji whispers another truth. That change needn't be destructive. It can tread softly. It can coexist with beauty. The terraces thrive not by being frozen in time, but by flowing through it. This place is never quite the same. Each season it molts, shifts, breathes. Cities may transform over decades. The terraces do so within days, through light, motion, and mood. To remain here through a full year is to witness a mountain in constant exhale. Spring comes with reflections. Water settles across each field, turning them into glassy mirrors. Clouds drift both above and beneath. Visitors often say it feels like walking through sky. Though the fields seem bare, they brim with beginnings. Beneath their quiet surfaces, life begins to stir. In summer, the green arrives. Shoots rise tall, transforming the slopes into velvet ribbons stretching beyond sight. The warmth grows thick. Frogs sing. Farmers move in thigh-deep water, their woven hats dotting the landscape like tiny boats on a jade ocean. Then autumn, golden, time for harvest. The sun ignites the rice, grain ripples like fire across the hills. Villages echo with celebration, families gather, voices lift in song. Sticky rice fills the pots, the dragon fully awakened shares its reward. Winter stills everything. Water drains, fields lie bare. Snow sometimes drapes the terraces, soft and slow. Frost leaves delicate lace along the stones. There are no tools in motion, no voices, just breathless silence. The dragon sleeps preparing. Every season pens its own stanza. Spring reflects, summer stretches, autumn nourishes, winter rests, and through it all the beauty of Longji remains unbroken. The beauty of the dragon lies not just in its contours, but in its cycle, in the way it embraces time, offering no resistance, in how it quietly transforms, never needing to declare its change. Photographers flock here, chasing the light, hoping to capture a glimpse of permanence. Yet the terraces yield to no lens. They move, they breathe, they murmur softly that beauty is not fixed. It's a rhythm, a practice, a promise renewed with each season. And so the dragon turns once more, not with fury or fire, but with water, grain, and breeze. Ultimately, these terraces are more than fields. They are a vow. Quiet, curved, carved into the mountain's edge. A promise passed gently from one hand to another, from season to season, from generation to generation. The dragon's spine is not merely an agricultural wonder, or a marvel of design. It tells the story of what can unfold when people choose to live with the land, not in opposition to it. Easier paths existed. The ancestors of Longji could have moved into the valleys, sought out flatter ground. But they remained. They studied the slope, listened to the rocks, followed the water's lead, and through their choices made the extraordinary feel natural, nourishing entire villages clinging to a mountainside. Each curve holds more than rice. It carries lessons of patience, legacy, and care. These terraces were not shaped in a few years or decades. They emerged over centuries. There's no shortcut to harmony, no machine that could replace the wisdom encoded in each stone wall, laid by roughened hands and quiet determination. Still, nothing here stands still. The terraces are alive. They adapt. They respond to weather, to need, to the shifting shape of the world. And therein lies their truth. They were never rigid, they have always flowed. Even now, as signals and screens reach higher into the hills, the terraces stay rooted. They change, but they don't disappear. Because their roots dig deeper than the earth. They stretch into stories, into rituals, into the simple, persistent act of planting and trusting the sky. To walk upon the dragon's spine is to witness an agreement between humankind and the land. A pact inked in sweat and sunlight, renewed at every harvest. It serves as a gentle reminder that progress isn't always about speed, and that greatness need not shout. Sometimes it speaks in the hush of a stream winding over stone. Perhaps this is why the terraces resonate with so many, from labourers and wanderers to dreamers. They stand for something nearly forgotten, that what endures is often not built through force, but through cadence, humility, and time. The dragon slumbers, the people endure, and the mountain, as ever, remembers. Most who visit Giza lift their eyes skyward, drawn to the towering forms of the pyramids and the eternal gaze of the Great Sphinx. Few, however, wonder what rests beneath the sands, beneath the Nile, beneath the drift of centuries. In the still shallows near the ancient settlement of Abu Rawash, not far from the Giza Plateau, a curious tale lingers. It tells of something vast, weathered, overlooked, an underwater sphinx. Local fishermen have murmured of it for ages, a smooth-backed shape, its symmetry too perfect to dismiss. A feline silhouette, half sunken beneath silt and sediment. When drought shrinks the Nile's waters, hints of it rise. Stone ridges, grooves, what some believe are weathered facial features, unclear, yet too intentional to ignore. No signs guide travellers to the place. There are no crowds, no gift shops, no buses idling. Only tall reeds, murky water, and silence. Those who've sought it say the land carries a charge, as though memory clings to the soil. Sonar equipment has revealed geometric traces, patterns beneath the surface, arrangements of blocks that seem deliberate. But most striking are the claims that this submerged form, sphinx-like in nature, might date back not just before the pyramids, but long before them. If substantiated, it could unseat long-accepted historical timelines. Conventional archaeology places the Great Sphinx at roughly 2500 BCE. But if this hidden sculpture is genuine, it may hail from a time when the Sahara still bloomed and the Nile coursed wildly through a fertile, vibrant world. Skeptics call it illusion, rock shaped by water and the longing of dreamers. Yet the alignment, the grooves, the shape, they raise more questions than they silence. And so the mystery waits, half buried and half remembered, like the land itself. Remains unexcavated. Official archaeologists have, for the most part, overlooked it. Perhaps it holds nothing, or perhaps it holds everything, a trace not only of Egypt's heritage, but of a world erased by flood and time. For now what they call the underwater sphinx rests silently. It does not sleep. It waits. And were it to speak, one might wonder what truths it would share, and why so many seem unwilling to listen. The tale of the submerged sphinx shifted from murmured legend to international curiosity during the 1980s. That was when several independent explorers and divers began releasing peculiar reports. They described a vast lion-shaped figure lying partially beneath the waters near the Giza Plateau. The earliest images were unclear, grainy, and largely disregarded, yet they stirred something that wouldn't fade. Intrigue. And more perilously, doubt. Among the first to bring attention to it was a passionate amateur Egyptologist. He claimed to have glimpsed a heavily eroded monument during a rare period of drought. According to his account, this was not an illusion created by water and wind. It bore structure, legs, balance, even hints of a sculpted face. Naturally, this clashed with established understanding. Egyptology, after all, thrives on order and accepted chronology. The prevailing view places the creation of the Giza pyramids and the Great Sphinx around 2500 BCE, during Pharaoh Khafre's reign. The idea of an older semi-submerged sphinx demanded a radical reimagining, not only of Egypt's timeline, but of humanity's as well. Academia responded with skepticism, sometimes overt disapproval. Without formal excavation, without radiocarbon analysis or stratigraphic validation, the idea could not be deemed credible. Many suggested the so-called underwater sphinx was merely limestone shaped by millennia of Nile floods and erosion. In Egypt, they reminded, nature often echoes intent. Wind, water, and time can sculpt, just as hands do. Yet the visuals kept appearing. Sonar scans continued to reveal peculiar alignments, too symmetrical, too defined, too deliberate. Then the theorists entered the scene. Writers, filmmakers, and fringe historians spun wider narratives around the enigma. They proposed the Sphinx was not merely Egyptian, but a vestige of a forgotten civilization. Atlantean, perhaps. Or the work of a proto-Egyptian society washed away in a prehistoric deluge. They noted signs of water erosion on the existing Sphinx, speculated about lost technologies, and suggested that the true origins of Egyptian culture might stretch far deeper into prehistory. As the debate intensified, the Earth itself remained unchanged. No sanctioned dig commenced, no institution claimed the site, and the figure, whatever it truly was, stayed buried, nestled between legend and sediment. The implication that something near Giza could predate the pyramids isn't just bold, it is transformative. If the underwater Sphinx is authentic, Egypt's history didn't start with the Old Kingdom. It began earlier, at a time when the Sahara teemed with green and the Nile wandered untamed. This idea found traction in the 1990s, when geologist Dr. Robert Schoch examined the Great Sphinx. He proposed that the vertical striations within its enclosure resulted not from desert wind, but from prolonged intense rainfall. Rainfall that last soaked the plateau around 7000 BCE, thousands of years before Egypt's first pharaohs. If water once shaped the Sphinx, could it also have concealed something older? The supposed underwater Sphinx lies lower, closer to ancient flood zones. Satellite scans and ground-penetrating radar have detected rectangular patterns and structured outlines, features that seem too precise to be natural. These findings suggest a deliberate hand, working in a time before hieroglyphs etched Egypt's earliest stories. Proponents of the theory reference the missing epochs, the silent stretch between the last ice age and the emergence of recorded dynasties. In those lost centuries, the Nile altered its course, the Sahara transformed from verdant savanna into desert, and cultures may have risen and vanished, unwritten and forgotten. That a prehistoric people, literate or not, could have crafted a monument of such scale seems implausible as it may seem to conventional historians. The question still lingers. Consider Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, constructed around 9600 BCE by hunter-gatherers. That ancient site features towering megaliths carved with animal figures, predating Stonehenge by several millennia. Could Egypt harbour a comparable enigma? Might there be a lost civilization that etched its legacy in stone long before papyrus ever bore their words? If the so-called underwater Sphinx truly originated from such an epoch, the implications would be staggering. It wouldn't merely point to forgotten ruins, but to an entire forgotten era. One that may have quietly influenced the minds behind Giza, leaving behind more than myth, perhaps a submerged monument now cloaked in obscurity. Stone does not forget, it holds memory. Around the location believed to conceal the underwater Sphinx, the earth speaks softly yet insistently, not merely of passing centuries, but of ancient waters. Sediment strata, erosion grooves, and flood deposits hint at a narrative older than the desert itself. Before the Nile followed its familiar course, before the first pharaohs etched names into eternity, something else may have stood. Geologists who've reviewed imagery and data from the Abu Rawash area point to curious patterns, smoothed, rounded incisions suggestive of water movement. These are not the marks of wind or drifting sand, but the result of flowing rain, a force long absent from this land. The same argument has been made about the Great Sphinx, particularly its enclosure wall. Observers note that the deep vertical fissures around its trench resemble the effects of torrential, prehistoric rainfall rather than arid winds. Now, at the site of this potential underwater sphinx, the very same signature appears, only hidden beneath a shallow, seasonal flood basin. When the Nile's water levels recede, or when excavation is briefly possible, parts of the structure seem to reveal themselves. Observers describe hunched forms, shoulder-like bulges, and a foundation that appears too level to be entirely natural. Researchers who've explored the vicinity note a geologically active zone, rich in clay, where water tables once surged dramatically. The stone surface is heavily worn, but the patterns follow the contours of the figure, flowing in such a way that suggests intentional shaping, then submergence. Sediment samples around the site date to the early Holocene, when the region was lush, fertile, and vulnerable to powerful floods. If sculpted during that time, the monument could have stood tall for centuries before being overtaken by shifting silt and displaced populations. Of course, critics claim these theories stem from wishful thinking. They argue that hopeful eyes often turn natural features into stories. Yet water doesn't fashion symmetry, carve pores, or align foundations that echo the layout of a sphinx just miles away. And so the question deepens. If this monument was concealed by the river, what else has been hidden beneath its current? More pressingly, how much of ancient memory remains buried, silent beneath the surface? If the underwater sphinx does exist, carved, ancient, and still, why hasn't it been brought to light? Why does it linger beneath layers of mud, passed over by archaeologists, neglected by authorities, and left to drift in obscurity? The truth, like the monument itself, may lie submerged. Egypt's archaeological system is cautious, and understandably so. The nation fiercely protects its heritage, governed by firm protocols, meticulous excavation procedures, and a preference for scholarly consensus. Digging at any new site, especially one that contradicts the accepted narrative, requires permission, financial support, international cooperation, and above all, institutional validation. And therein lies the obstacle. There exists an unspoken creed among heritage authorities. Egypt's past must not be rewritten without overwhelming, irrefutable proof. Unfortunately, no official excavation has ever been sanctioned at the alleged Sphinx site. The research that does exist comes from independent voices, foreign scholars, and speculative writers. Credible or not, none backed by national endorsement. Their findings remain intriguing, yet inconclusive. Then, there's the river itself. The Nile is no static presence. It shifts, floods, and retreats in rhythm with time. The basin where the monument supposedly lies is often waterlogged, submerged for long stretches. Excavation here would demand draining the area, managing delicate ecosystems, and safeguarding a structure long buried under pressure and silt. Such an endeavour would require years, perhaps decades. Beyond the technical hurdles, there are political dimensions. Should a discovery of this scale come to light, validated, such a discovery would unsettle more than academic schedules. It could reshape accepted narratives, unsettle national identity, and spark a media storm, an outcome Egypt might not be eager to face. The Ministry of Antiquities typically favours revelations that highlight Egypt's magnificence, not ones that potentially challenge its core history. Some quietly suggest that certain groups might already possess more information than they disclose, hinting at confidential assessments conducted out of public view. Yet in the absence of public documentation, peer-reviewed evidence, or formal declarations, these rumours drift into the realm of speculation, and so the structure remains submerged. Whether by oversight or intent, it lies beneath layers of earth and doubt. There is a certain irony here. In a nation so committed to conserving its ancient past, one of its most intriguing puzzles may lie unnoticed, undocumented, and untouched by the official record of time. But even the most well-hidden secrets cannot remain hidden forever. To the ancient Egyptians, the Sphinx symbolized far more than stonework. It was part protector, part deity, part enigma. With the body of a lion and the visage of a human, it embodied the fusion of might and intellect, physical strength guided by regal wisdom. It stood as a celestial sentinel, placed at the intersection of mortal life and divine influence. The most iconic example, of course, is the Great Sphinx of Giza, Rising 66 feet high, it has watched over the plateau for more than 4,000 years, greeting each sunrise and keeping vigil over the tombs of kings. Its origins remain a matter of debate. Some attribute it to Khafra, while others suggest it may be significantly older, its features perhaps recarved as time passed. So what might it signify if another sphinx, worn by water and potentially more ancient, waits quietly just a few miles away? It would shift everything we understand. No historical accounts describe a pair of sphinxes at Giza. Ancient texts remain mute on the subject. Yet, in the Greco-Roman period, there are hints of guardians arranged in harmony, framing sacred entrances. Symmetry held sacred meaning in Egyptian design. Temples often featured pairs, statues, obelisks, avenues of lions. Why not sphinxes in tandem? Some researchers now propose that the underwater sphinx is not a duplicate, but perhaps the archetype, an early pre-dynastic rendering that was later reinterpreted on a monumental scale. If that holds true, it means the concept of the sphinx didn't originate with dynastic builders, but stemmed from a more ancient culture. A culture whose myths endured, evolving through time. And if the monument arose before the written word, it may not reflect the theological doctrines of the pharaohs at all. Its intent could have been celestial, spiritual, or commemorative, marking a deluge, a long-lost deity, or a shift in the stars. The lion's form is intentional. In ancient Egyptian belief, lions represented the horizon, the sacred threshold of dawn and dusk. A sphinx gazing eastward eternally welcomes the rebirth of the sun. To chisel that image in stone was to immortalize a cosmic rhythm. Now envision such a guardian shaped before pyramids ever graced the plateau, aligned to protect, to observe, to wait. It would do more than reshape a timeline. It would reframe the entire mythological foundation of Egypt, not as the genesis of civilization, but as the enduring whisper of an even older epoch. And perhaps the image lying beneath the waters is fittingly hidden, for a sentinel watching over forgotten realms. As quiet ripples of this submerged sphinx reach global ears, a subtle divide has surfaced, one deeper than stone or sediment. On one side stand conventional Egyptologists, measured, methodical, grounded in peer-reviewed consensus. On the other are independent thinkers, alternative researchers, and inquisitive observers who believe something remarkable remains overlooked. The academic community stresses the importance of verified data, stratigraphy, inscriptions, radiocarbon analysis. Their caution is well-founded. Egypt's terrain is filled with formations that mimic anthropomorphic or zoomorphic shapes. Misinterpretation can lead to misleading conclusions. Indeed, archaeology must tread carefully. The remnants of history are delicate, irreparable once disturbed by reckless theories or sensationalism. But others contend that prudence has evolved into stagnation. Many independent investigators, engineers, scientists, and surveyors from beyond the traditional field argue that the submerged formation, along with other anomalies, warrants more thorough investigation. They cite high-resolution satellite photos revealing symmetrical outlines, LiDAR scans detecting rectangular substructures beneath mud, and erosion traces that appear shaped not by randomness chaos, they suggested, may not emerge by chance but from design. Questions have been raised about the underlying political reasons for the prevailing silence. Tourism, after all, channels visitors through familiar, celebrated landmarks. Introducing a new sphinx, especially one that might challenge the accepted chronology, could unsettle Egypt's national story and its narrative authority. The concern, some say, isn't about deception, but about the implications of rewriting history from the ground up. Today, books, documentaries, podcasts, and academic panels routinely feature the underwater sphinx. It has transformed into a symbol of concealed history, serving both as a rallying banner for some and a cautionary warning for others. Advocates argue passionately for transparent excavation, while critics urge restraint, warning of pseudoscience. And, as is often the case, the truth lingers somewhere in the middle, obscured beneath a cacophony of voices as dense as the Nile's sediment. This isn't just an academic schism, it's deeply emotional. It reflects how societies choose to engage with the past. Do they only trust evidence confirmed by consensus, or are they willing to explore the clues that lie just out of reach? The underwater sphinx thrusts that question to the forefront. It is not merely a formation, it's a gauge of collective curiosity. And as long as it lies undisturbed, debates will echo above a monument that remains silent yet holds the power to reshape perception. There is a quiet unease in mysteries that hide in plain sight, especially when one bears the shape of a lion and gazes upward through layers of silted time. The so-called underwater sphinx near Giza may be an illusion or a legacy, but its magnetic presence is difficult to dismiss. It evokes something primal, a desire not just to uncover, but to remember. Because beneath every stone mystery lies the deeper ache of human forgetfulness. Across centuries, humanity has coexisted with remnants. Cities collapse, tongues vanish, great societies are swallowed by ash, sea, and time. We peer backward not only for knowledge, but for belonging. Who were they, and how far do our shared tales extend? What truths were left behind as civilization surged forward? If this monument is real, and if it was indeed shaped before the advent of writing, it becomes more than an artifact. It becomes a voice from an unseen chapter. A symbol from an age when people possibly interpreted stars differently, revered the earth more intimately, or told stories now beyond our grasp. Some envision it as the work of an advanced, forgotten culture, a notion often pushed aside by traditional circles. Yet, regardless of that theory's merit, the emotional weight it carries persists. The idea of a monument that predates the pyramids, hidden by floodwaters and erased from memory, confronts us with civilization's fragility. And perhaps this is why the tale survives. It reminds us that time does not march in a straight line. That greatness isn't forever. That stone too can vanish if the current flows long enough. But most importantly, it reassures us that wonder isn't obsolete. That the earth continues to keep secrets unlogged in any digital archive. In an age dominated by immediate answers and ceaseless information, the underwater sphinx remains a rare gift, a question still open, a possibility still intact. Whether it's natural rock or a carved sentinel, it serves a purpose. It rekindles wonder. It urges us to imagine that perhaps the past runs deeper than we believed, that myths might echo truth, that beneath what we accept lies something waiting to speak. Whether it is the product of chisels or coincidence, confirmed or cast aside, the underwater sphinx endures where it always has, beneath layers of earth, of silence, of speculation. It bears no nameplate, no acclaim, no floodlights, yet it calls quietly from beneath the noise. For every monument unearthed in Egypt, countless more lie hidden, some too delicate to lift, others submerged by the ever-wandering Nile. And a few like this remain in view, yet unacknowledged, not for lack of significance, but because the questions they pose have no easy answers. Perhaps that is the real power of the underwater sphinx, not in its scale, not even in its age, but in its stillness. It invites us gently to listen. They are often brought face to face with the limits of what is truly known, and the quiet unease of what may have been overlooked. In reality, excavation might never occur. Barriers of politics, funding, and long-standing tradition rise higher than any ancient tomb. Yet this doesn't diminish its significance. Quite the opposite, in fact. The monument's obscurity has turned it into a kind of reflection, one that reveals not only what remains hidden beneath the surface, but also what societies choose to honour, and what they quietly allow to fade. It gently reminds us that history is far from a finished story. Rather, it's a living riddle scattered across landscapes and coastlines, waiting patiently for a shift in the tide, a new way of seeing, or a question bold enough to stir the dust. Perhaps someday the waters will retreat and reveal the full figure, its face unveiled. Perhaps ground-penetrating tools will affirm what legend has long whispered. Or perhaps the enigma will continue, passed down like a hush between stones from one era to the next. Regardless of whether it proves to be monument or mirage, the underwater sphinx already performs its most important role. It sparks wonder. And in a time so saturated with answers, that might be its truest power. Because perhaps the most ancient truths aren't buried merely in earth or centuries, but within us, in our instinct to wander, to remember, and to believe that somewhere, beneath surf or desert dust, the past still draws breath and waits patiently to be found.